Muslim culture and stuff like that within the context of Algeria, and also in the context of like Linda Joville psychiatric hospital. So the daily life of the Dowers. Franz Fanon and Jacqueline Azoulay, 1954 or 1955.
I think Lynn said it was Jacques.
Okay. At the dawn of psychopathological research in Algeria, it seems singularly important to us to clarify certain privileged behaviors that we can agree to call primitive. We will not raise the problem of the value of these attitudes. We will not try to judge them on the basis of supposed arrhythmic of civilization. Certainly, we are not saying that in this domain every position is valid and defensible, but neither do we want, under the cover of the latest tendency, cultural relativism, and to minimize the task of the tasks may claim somewhat utopianly. It is traditional to say, as we will show the developing our remarks, that the Maghreb is the land of genies. Such
Genies.
Oh gosh, shit is this word? Genies. That's what it is, genies. Where was the other one? Yeah, it was genies. And this is HAGIO graphic. Oh my gosh, of course it won't let me say it. Maybe we'll say it in here. Hagiographic of relating to or being hagiography. Oh, that makes sense. Or relating to, oh my gosh, it's just like a definition, the words within inside the definition. It's weird. A biography account of petroleum that idealizes and excessively flatters its subject. Givens can only interest the specialists of religions. For the psychiatrist, the thrilling and generous reality of genies is such that he experiences here and there the desire to put some order in it, not so as to classify, but instead in order to discover amidst the cluster of facts and general lines according to which all take shape and can be explained. Some of the data that we will yield might have been explainable on the basis of other constellations. Here, the progression is not linear. An attempt to render in these orders articulations the elements of the doctrine would have been valid were it not for the necessity which imposed itself on us to render the mental world of the Algerian Muslim in all its exuberant aridity. Fucking hell, come on. Fuck you, dude. Fuck's sakes. This thing that like you look up words is not consistent at all. Aridity.
In British English, these would be said as aridity.
I was right, aridity. Yeah. From the start, there is a fact that dominates absolutely everything. The vast majority of the Maghrebi population is distributed into dowers. The individuals who live there constitute human communities, those whose organization varies little from the extremities of the Maghreb to the others. If it is added that in general the Maghribi remains fixed to his dower for life, it becomes clear that the dower constitutes an essential geographical and human unity. With the decline of the nomadism and the progressive oh my gosh, hold on, let me look at this word. Sedentarization.
Yeah, sedentarization.
Oh my god.
Can you just not hear me? Is that what's going on?
What? I'm looking up the definition. What's wrong with that?
No, because earlier I said genies and you didn't hear me, and I said the other one you didn't hear me. So I was wondering if it's just messing up
No,
so you
because
can't hear me.
I said genies.
Right, but I had said it like 45 seconds before that. So I'm saying, did you just not hear me?
No, I was telling you that I said it that way. Because you were correcting me. I'm gonna hear this real quick. I want to hear it.
Sedentarization.
Sedentarization. Oh, weird. Which is the historical and social transition of a nomadic and semi-nomadic population to a permanent and subtle way of life. And non-nomadism. The importance of the dower is strengthened, and it is within this almost immutable framework, with its highly stable form of structures that the life of the Maghrebs has unfolded for centuries. Although the majority of its inhabitants remain definitely attached to it, we nevertheless ought to mention that there are exceptions to this rule. Of the rare nomads, the semi-nomads who are called to live far from the dower, there are those that military service removes from their places of birth. Another case concerns those who live in the economically deprived regions. In such instances, it is common to see that the men seek out work regularly in the towns or in large agricultural regions. When life in the dowers is studied closely, one is struck by the violent contrast between that life and what can be observed in the towns of the Maghreb. In these towns, where a population of European origin largely dominates, the type of life is Western. That is to say, dominated by modern technology, with moving and complex forms. In the dower, on the contrary, the style of life is natural and characterized by its simplicity and its fidelity to the secular traditions that has remained particularly unchanged to this very day, especially in the Muslim quarters of the town that we see contact between the two cultures, the two civilizations, and we have invoked Western and Maghriban. Instead of observing these mutual interpretations, resulting in a perfect and harmonious interbreeding, one observes their specific coexistence, with the Muslims dry dweller remaining, often at the margins of Western civilization. Despite certain vague desires to go beyond the traditional way of life, the city dwellers, of course, is not the rural dwellers, as his conditions is not modeled in the same economic determinants, and his life is less rustic. Nonetheless, both these Muslims spontaneously recognize each other as belonging to one and the same cultural community. They share the same beliefs. They are brothers. Another observation can be made. If one compares the villages whose populations are essentially of European origins to the Muslim dowers, which form geographically comparable human localities, and the same dissimilarity stands out, like we have indicated. Of our very different and far from more complex structures, they are very reminiscent of villages in France by their appearances. They are not typically Muslim. Such comparisons today make the Dower appear like an anachronistic grouping, perpetuating a past that would a priori seem impossible to discover in regions in which the offsprings of so-called Western civilizations are prospering with great validity. Ultimately, powerful reasons thus justify the study of populations that remain fixed to the Dowers. The Dower constitutes a stable and geographically limited space. It is the permanently unfolding site of barely changing life of the collectivity that does not become agitated and does not incline to any upheaval of its deep structure, except during largely sporadic perioxymens. We're gonna look it up anyways. Here it is. Paroxysm. A sudden, uncontrollable outburst of emotions and physical action over the course of the history of the Maghreb. From the human point of view, it is worth describing the society of men separately from that of women, with the former leading an essentially public life, where the latter lead a largely cloistered existence. We're going to find out what that word means. Did you give up? Cloistered, an architecture feature consisting of the covered walkways, open arcades, and colonnade running along the walls and buildings and forming a quadrangle existence. The man lives little at a familial domicile, which he leaves mostly under the women's domain. The feminine element remains attached to it, occupied with obscured and internal household tasks that are not made complex by the almost complete absence of furniture. The monotony of culinary preparations and the rusticness of the cramped dwelling. It goes without saying that a numerous progeny and very modest revenues, as is the norm, are significant factors that tend to render still more natural the conditions of family life, and thus also the women's lives. In certain regions, the women can also engage at home in handcrafts, weaving, pottery, following a rudimentary technique in the use for centuries. Some domestic chores can take the women out of the dwelling, but then they leave veiled, thus remaining to a certain extent in the margins of public life. However, the women participate in their very own social life. We speak here of that which takes shape during the meeting, which are very frequent among women. Traditional visits from parents and female friends form a main basis of this life. To be added to this are collective Friday visits to the cemeteries and regular pilgrimages to the marabouts dedicated to worshiping local saints. Their large religious celebrations, births, boys, circumcisions, marriages, and deaths also comprise part of the various solemnities of the occasion of which women gather together in separations from the men. Women live in a closed society that remains in the shadows of men's society, as men alone are able to participate in a really public society, open to the world. Indeed, contrary to his companion, a man can meet with his fellow men freely in broad daylight after his daily work is done. That is, if the work isn't itself does not already enable him to do so when undertaking jobs on the countryside, as a craftsman or small businessman, or even in factory work in certain cases. The public squares of the Moorish cafe are places at which men come together with other men. Though the men's social life is richer and more elaborate than the women's, it is nevertheless no less natural and serene. If during work some sort of hierarchy becomes evident, subordinating, for example, the landless farmers to the sharecroppers who employs him, in the public life of the dowers, things are not the same. Masculine relations in it rest on deeply democratic bases, and the only ones who are set apart from the collectivity are those set in the relief of saintlessness, or personal influence. These latter contribute to making up the dejeuner, a sort of assembly of notables that emanates and directs the life of the dower, by settling individual disputes in it, upholding morality and customs, and ensuring that order prevails. The great religious celebrations of Islam are also an occasion for men to have large meetings in which the followers of one and the same faith come together fraternally. Meetings such as those occasioned by marriages, circumcisions, etc., further provide men with the possibility of fraternized solidarity among believers is given a concrete expression and is a remarkable social cement. When the man joins his wife in her house, it is to occupy the place that the wife has disdained and prepared for him, that of the master who is respected for his virility and God-given authority. In the patriarchal type of society, the elders dominate within the family. The husband, the father, takes precedence. The wife is the servant whom one appreciates, and the mother whom one consults. The wife is also the being who is originally foreign and whom one has brought in under one's roof. She is being who represents the world, others, and unknown. Her situation is ambiguous. On the one hand, her position is subjugated. On the other, a subjugated one, and on the other, it is stamies and power of the men. The wife participates in the occult. She stands in relations to the world that throws the man. She knows a lot of secrets. She must therefore be taken good care of. The man fears his servant. The wife thus gets her revenge. Religious life in the dowers is facilitated by the relative simplicity of Islam's major religious rules and the practices that ensue from them. Beliefs in an all-powerful God and in the missions of his Prophet Muhammad is absolutely general and always formulated with a very strong conviction. Prayers is quite commonly practiced, above all by men when they reach middle age. The fasting ritual of the month of Ramadan is always respected by adults and assumed a great importance, modifying for the time the rhythm of group life, as a reverence and abstinence observes. During the day contrast with nocturnal liveliness and jubilation. For the child who begins to fast as puberty approaches, it marks one of the very first contacts with the father's religion. As for charity, the mutual aid, these are spontaneously carried out. The neighbors, the travelers, or the wanderers' request always receives a favorable reply. This is how the life of the Muslim is internalized, and his adherence to Islam is concretized. As followers of the same religion, believers thus have a clear conscience of being part of a real life community. Maraboutism, which I'm going to look up. Maraboutism. Maraboutism. Why would you do that? refer to a lifestyle, role, and veneration of a marabout, which is a Muslim religious leader, holy man, a spiritual mystic widely found in North and West Africa. It is described both societal devotion to these figures and the influence of their traditional practice and their respective communities, which we have discussed at length, further adds its mark to religious life, suffusing it with the local character as expressed in the entire series of popular beliefs and practices shared by the group as a whole. The life that we have just invoked appears overall simple, rustic, natural, lacking in extraordinary events. This enables us to understand why these populations do not have the experience of duration as universal and as abstract as that of the Westerner. The only remarkable givens that permit them to perceive share a notion of time valid for all are the great natural rhythms that produce cosmic phenomena. The evolution of the sun, the moon, the succession of seasons permit each person to form a sufficiently objective idea of duration. Added to this are the great religious festivals that reoccur at set dates, constituting salient events and punctuate community life. We thus have a fairly exact overview of all that constitutes the natural calendar of the illiterate rural population, which have remained outside Western culture. It is clear that our conception of time and our calendar, imbued with a learned culture and a history that is foreign to them, are too abstract in their symbolism for those that a centuries-old tradition sustains, one popular in origin and oral in transmission. Resulting from this is a major lack of precision in the evaluation of duration, which always astonishes the observer. The rural dwellers often has only a rather holy notion of his age, his history, and that of the dower. He proceeds via broad approximations and appeals to group-specific temporal markers. The death of a notable and unidation. Unidation. I don't know if that's it. We're gonna find out. Inundation, sorry. A frost, a famine, or a superabundant harvest. These elements are already valid for an entire society, as small as it may be, not to mention someone who has recourse to facts that are of interest only to his own persons or those close to him, birth, illness, etc. However, if the man is placed back in his milieu, our astonishment no longer serves, for the dour inhabitants move with ease among his fellows. Throughout his entire life, he remains closely adapted to the framework in which he came into the world, and to which his past and his daily experience attach him evermore. His father are in his image. They possess a same patrimony, which we're going to look up. Patrimony. You gave up. Oops.
Patrimony.
Patrimony. The same certitudes. Oh my gosh. Every other word, I guess, today. Every other word. Certitude. The same system of reference. Among them, the uninterrupted language develops from the outset, one that can do without words, and that gesture and even silence can be enough to maintain, but that the spoken word makes it possible to extend by drawing from the springs of the tradition living in everyone's heart. The case of the foreigner who arrived at the dower presents, it seems to us, interesting features that ought to be specified, because he is Muslim, sustained by the same belief, an inheritor of the same faith. The foreigner is a brother. His outward appearance, his behavior, his language, make him all the more familiar. The hospitality reserved for him is always very generous. It has become proverbial in the West, such it is perfection. However, it is if the stranger is scared and respectable, he is also the other. Okay, thank you. He is also the other, one who comes from elsewhere, who has lived under other skies. This is why the presence of the traveler who gives himself defenseless to his host engenders a feeling of uneasiness. He represents the unknown, the mystery, even if he divulges his thoughts and opens up his heart directly. He cannot prevent anxiety from emerging all around him. The various systems of signals make him familiar to us, to all intents and purposes. He represents a system of reference that escapes us. He is one whose power are perhaps great, or whose limits and origins one is unaware of. It might one expect to baleful influence of some beneficial luck. He is, in a word, someone that must be treated with consideration because the power of his word, of his gaze, is unknown, because he perhaps has some secret relations with these other people. Ultimately, life in the dowers is peaceful, and each person's existence is part of the universe of profound serenity. It is, you might say, without history, as the accidental appears absent from it, regulated by the ancient traditions, authenticated by the common religion, and it expresses an ultimate and profound adherence of the members of the collectivity to a well-defined, shock-free style of life. The unalterable and unanimous belief in the perfect and all-powerful God, the relative simplicity of the very form of religious life, facilitates the thriving of the life close to nature, with its regular rhythms, making all individuals' hysteria impossible. Man has absolute confidence in God and in his creation, with the individual planted as a reed, bowing and self-effacing before the will of Allah. Man has confidence in his fellow men, who share with him the common vision of the world, in which each thing occupies the place reserved for it in a definitely established order. That being the divine order, it is crucial for us to upset. This order is what the
Not to upset.
Yeah, this order is what.
Not to upset. Sorry.
Yes, you said it twice. I got it. I'm sorry. I don't know why you said it twice. My bad. Sorry. Where was I at? Great, I just lost where I was at. Okay, here we go. This order, I got it. This order is what the collective effort strives to keep going by the production of each instant, in which each person is linked with his brothers. Nothing can arise that was not expected in advance. As for the rest, the unforeseen, that is also of the order of God, whose design are inscrutable to humans. Much has been said about the carelessness of nonchalance of the Maghribi, his supposedly characteristic lack of concern about tomorrow. In a word, much has been said about his fatalism. Such an opinion, it seems to us, considered only a secondary negative aspect of a style of life, that in actual fact proceeds from the fundamental certainty and security. Man finds himself wholly in a stable world that is in fact the heir to the past and to a present whose continuity is recognized and valorized by the individual's total adherence. I know that tomorrow will be made up of yesterday and today, to the extent that God allows me to glimpse his design. Anyhow, whatever may happen tomorrow will be unable to signify anything other than the all-powerfulness of God. Ugh. Sorry, I don't believe in God. I don't like this because I don't believe in God and everything, and this is just all mysticism. What escapes me about my future is nevertheless destined to me, my God, by God, in all justice. The accidental, by surprising me, proves just how weak and powerless I am within the universe. It allows me to make up better Allah's generosity. He is the source of all certainty. Nature, with its reassuring rhythms, constitutes for me a faithful world desired by God, with forever change, the weight, adding to it by time with the excessive generations that it produces, and renders familiar to me by virtue of our common faith. As we have just described it, the life of the dower appears to be without history, just like the life of its inhabitants. The advent of history begins with the adversity, but there are several forms of adversity. There is the one that strikes the collectivity as a whole, or in its quasi-totality, one linked to economic crises, to the meteorological cataclysm, to natural catastrophes. The life of the dower, its security, its quiet, are then endangered. The individual never comes to be isolated. Rather, he decides to fight or to submit without resistance to the difficulties that arise. He feels his brother at his side, all of them hit by the same tragic events. The misfortune of each person merges with that of all. The individual feels less alone, his lot being linked to that of the group. This is how he is led to think and to act in accordance with the attitude and decisions of the dower, which, when all is said and done, can call on the resources that God offers to men. The history of each person, in this case, is still that of the community. But the properly personal history enters into existence and begins at the moment when illness cuts an individual off from others and isolates him without the possible involvement from the entourage. A deep furrow is dug that separates the man from the world, leaving him powerless along with an evil that is strictly his. This is when the man that no initiation has fortified turns spontaneous towards a privileged being who can help him and cure him, to the extent that God renders such aid effective. Indeed, God's more or less direct action is essential. If one is ill, it is because God has allowed it. If a cure remains possible, it is, again, with his permission. Whether God is testing me through illness, whether he favors me by thus, or whether he is pushing me for acts that have offered him. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. You repeat it again.
Okay, can I say something when you're done in this paragraph?
All this escapes me. The ways of God being foreign to me. There is no common measure between his perfection and his power and the humble believers that I am. God plumbs my heart, judges me, and can only adore him. I can only adore him. However, he does not forbid me from having recourse to those he allows some hold over sickness, some power of cure. So I will consult those privileged beings able to help me in this, with all the more hope, as I know man is able to affect me in my health, to extent that God permits such an action. Thus the illness that man may have contributed to inflicting upon me, he can also take part in removing. What's up?
So it's kind of sad. I don't believe in God. You don't believe in God. So I'm talking to you, atheist to atheist. That, the Muslims in Palestine believe that God is allowing this to happen to them and that this will make the world better. And it makes me sad.
Understandable. In the society that surrounds me, several categories of individuals may come to my aid. First, the women, who often participate in the secrets of the world of genies, and know the power of the world and of the desire. Women may perhaps remove the weight of the illness that is harming me. They pass mysterious recipes among themselves that are very often effective. More powerful than the woman and more knowledgeable than them are the Equach, IQQACHS, versed in knowledge of the book's word. They know how to wield them against all forms of illness in order to protect and cure. Their science is secretly transmitted, but it is no less official and public in its application. It is entirely subject to God, for its laddered person can do nothing without divine intervention. Above the AQQACHS, there are lastly the saints, the friends of God, who remain or are destined to remain next to God, the source of all fortune. See, this is why I don't believe in God, because this is bullshit, because they can come up with anything they fucking want to. Well, you know what? The reason why you're not being cured is because you have something that it's just bull. I'm sorry. This is bullshit. To look onto a deity that you don't know anything about to cure you. It's fucking weird. The power of the saints is great, and their benedictions inexhaustible. To prevent or cure the illness that genies' perfidious words or envy can cause me, it is enough to ask the marabout to invoke his holy luck. A man has further recourse to sorcerers, though seldom does one maintain relations with such individuals, few of whom exist today, and who live removed from their group. Their action does not refer to God's authority, although God is actually the only master, govern them and tolerating them having some power, and who thus has them participate in the accomplishment of his design. The sorcerer heir to the secret science transmitted through a purely professional intuition is cut off from the mass of believers. It is shameful to consult him, and it is dangerous to do so owing to his relations with the forces of evil. The infirmity that he cures, he may actually also have helped to bringing out. Likewise, he may also help it to reappear later. Such in its simplicity is the natural life of the Dowers. We believe that such a description is fundamental. It brings to light a technical and cultural backwardness that, as we've already said, is characteristics of the population of Algeria in the general and appear to us nowhere to manifest. As in the Dowers, there is magnitude can be accurately engaged. This backwardness is rendered more palpable by the existence of Algerian soil, of the fractions of the population who lives in Western lifestyle and possesses a broad experience of modern technologies. This coexistence and contrast is not without interest for the sociologists' concerns to establish the exact determinism of phenomenon as astonishing as this, and to discern under the apparent stability of the life of the dower the sign of possible transformation that would come about progressively, or in the form of a sudden mutation. But such is not our aim. We have wanted only to indicate that our description, insofar as it is valid, nevertheless remains tied to a given period of Algerian history. Modern technologies, even if they continue to be unfamiliar to populations still oriented around the exploration and explanation of nature, according to the relatively rudimentary and primitive mode of bygones, one to our eye as Westerners, will nevertheless be the likely source of new problems. Stability, the past, traditions will not be able to explain everything in the future. Tomorrow, a new description will be necessary, one that will have to bear above all on research into all that which, in this already less natural life, will signal a break with the past, without asking why they have remained so important to this day. Let's simply say that all the elements we have highlighted explain the still current extent of vivacity. I'm gonna look that word up.
I agree with you on vivacity. I don't know what it means though.
Vivacity.
The equality of being attractively energetic, enthusiastic, and full of life.
Vivacity.
Vivacity of highly ancestral and traditional beliefs. Stemming from this data. So all they're doing, like, they might not agree with these things, I might not agree with these things, but these are like important facts to understand, to be able to engage in the Muslim section of the Belinda Jovial Psychiatric Hospital. So all this, we might disagree with it, but they're trying to understand so they can engage with them better. Stemming from this data. What's up?
I was also going to say, it also helps us with dealing with Muslim people today, like to understand where they're coming from.
Sure. Stemming from this data, it is an important notion. Some conducts, some reactions can appear primitive to us, but that is only a vague judgment, one that is both questionable and bears on poorly defined characteristics, which secretly helps us progress in our knowledge of the Algerian Muslim. Man, what's up?
Scarcely helps us.
Thank you. In actual fact, it must be said that these beliefs, conducts, or reactions ought not to astonish us, for they are not the sign of an abnormal. They're the accidental or the paradoxical, as would be the case if we were to find them among populations on the European continent. For example, where a Persian to tell us.
Parisian.
It's okay. The genies are what produces wildness. The statement would not have the same value if we gathered it on the lips of the Maghreb Muslim, because in Algeria, such belief is normal and adapted, and we find it in the mentally ill patients and in the healthy man. Agree with standard ideas. In Algeria, it is normal to believe in genies. We said that in Algeria, the material conditions of populations appear on the verge of being modified. Concerning popular beliefs, this is less apparent. They continue to remain very deeply rooted in individual and collective consciousness, perhaps lagging behind the vital economic and technological conditions of existence. That's the end of that chapter. 12. Introduction to Sexuality Disorders Among North African. Jacques Azoulay, Francois Sanchez, France Fanon, 1955. All right. Of course, over the course of our psychiatric practice in Algeria, our attention was drawn to the frequency of disorders that are attributed or are tied to sexuality. The fundamental modalities of these disorders are circumscribed by the different types of impotence among men and the vaginismus.
No, vaginismus.
Go look it up.
It's a disease that has to do with pain or stuff amongst the vagina.
You okay with me still looking it up, though?
Uh-huh.
No, you're not okay with it?
I said okay.
The voluntary contraction or spasm of a pelvic floor muscles surrounding the vagina. I said that for TikTok purposes.
Vaginismus.
Vaginismus. Wait.
Vaginismus.
Vaginismus. Huh. Vaginismus among women. The importance of this theme within delusions incited us to research the extent to which it had its origins in normal consciousness. It was necessary then to investigate normal consciousness, the nods of belief. A rapid survey enabled us to observe that sexual impotence was an especially preoccupying problem, since Muslim society is founded on the authority of men. Any deficient or virile potence is felt as a major alteration of the personality, as if the man rendered impotent has been targeted in his essential attribute. The importance appear proportionally far more frequently in the Muslim milieu than in the European milieu. Several Muslim practitioners were questioned and stated to us that 2 or 3 cases of impotence were detected in the course of the same consultation. However, the doctor here is generally the last one to be consulted. One has first recourse to the marabouts, the Taleb, Taleb, because, as we shall see, these disorders are almost never attributed to an organ. They are most often seen to be in relations with magical practices and have to be treated as such. On this view, we can likewise understand the existence of closely related phenomena pertaining to feminine sexuality, which we will also come to study, an attempt at a psychopathological understanding of sexuality disorders can be stretched. Clinically speaking, it is roughly possible to distinguish between 3 major groups of impotence: impotence through hormonal deficiency, impotence of nervous organs tied to organic alterations of the lumbus sacral. We're gonna look that up.
Lumbosacral, lower back cord, backbone type cord.
Region of the body involving the lumbar spine, lower back, and the sacrum. Okay. Well, it has cord. And the psychic or central nervous system, impotence. We find these distinctions in part in the beliefs of Muslims. We were able to question the Taleb, ca settled in the Castellani, not far from Algiers, and well reputed in the region. It could be said that he even specialized in treating impotence. In truth, his explanation seems somewhat confused to us. But he took his inspiration from a book that we are able to find, in which impotence was meticulously studied from the clinical, ideological, and above all therapeutic point of view. We are talking about the book of Clemency, of Medicine and Wisdom by Ali Sawati, an Arab writer from the Middle Ages, known above all as a commentator of the Quran. For Al-Sawati, impotence can stem from 3 causes: malformation of the genitals and the breath of demons and magic. A. The first group comprises all forms of impotence caused by an obvious malformation of the genital organs, lack of development, testicular atrophy, etc. This disorder is in general accompanied by a weakness of absence of sexual desire. Here, impotence is attributed to an infirmity and is the principle beyond the Taleb's therapeutic means. It is, in this case, I gotta do a fucking... These guys make me do so much in the middle of my readings. So annoying. Accompanied by a weakness or absence of sexual desires. Here, impotence is attributed to the infirmity and is in principle beyond the Taleb's therapeutic means. It is in this case, it seems that the patient is in fact more willingly or more systematically addressed to the doctors, At most, said Saweti, one could try to feed the patient the male organ of a wild donkey, which is to be taken from the animal before it expires and mixed with certain spices that he details expertly. B. The sort of impotence ascribed to the Denjins. What's up?
Dejins. It's Dejins. It's another word for genie.
What's up?
It's another word for genie.
Thank you. Has a different character. The man made impotent by the breath of demons is recognized by his ejaculating prior to having had relations with a woman, says Saweti. The issue here, as we see, is the phenomenon of premature ejaculation. As that impotence is interpreted as a punishment from the Denjin, who the man must have annoyed in a more or less distant past, and as these demons are known to be particularly sensitive, then engaging in preparatory rites to ward off their wrath is ongoing necessity. It is recommended to hold one's hand over the mouth and to pronounce the Besmillah before spitting, for fear of the group spirits, so that if one happens to be in that place, it is advised to move away. Mekaturing, I'm going to look at that word. I think it's I can't say it. Maturation? I think it's maturing. Uratng.
Micturating.
Micturating, a form of medical terms of urinating, has its right of prior warning of orientation, of attitude, etc., to which the country dwellers remain faithful. Children are watched to make sure that they do not urinate in the streets, in the inner courtyards, in their garden, on the rubbish, or in many places reputed to be haunted, particularly at night. Those who lack respect of genies, those who, according to the Arab expression, dint their prestige, are almost invariably punished with pathological afflictions, such as contusionous affections. Let's find out. Contentious. Oh, it's you.
Cutaneous.
Cutaneous, relating to affecting or existing on the skin.
Cutaneous.
Cutaneous infections and pervasions of a sense of nervous diseases, wildness. And we will cite the case of one of our patients who attributed his impotence to the fact that he once accidentally walked in the blood of a sheep with his throat freshly cut on the occasion of the feast of Mawlid. The man made impotence on account of offending the Denji has to have recourse to the Teleb, who will seek to appease the Denji in various ways. Invocation, the making of amulets that must be worn permanently on the body and on which various magical formula are inscribed in a leather satch, or the ingestion of specific products. And the marabout that we consulted stated that the results are mostly positive. C. The case of impotence attributed to magical practice, to some act of sorcery, appear to be the most frequent and most complex. Impotence here is marked by the inability to achieve the erection or the loss of erection at the moment of intromission. The man is then said to be bewitched or bound marabout. The bewitching is generally performed by the spouse who wants to make her husband impotent, unless deeming herself not to be expert enough. She has recourse to another woman reputed for her knowledge of these magical practices, Impotence is then most often selective. Thus, a woman who has been cheated on can bind her husband, who becomes impotent for all women other than herself. This bewitching is more or less illicit. It is fairly well accepted by the collective morality. It is a part of what can be called white magic. But the binding can be global, such that the man becomes totally impotent. This, for example, in the case of a jealous or abandoned woman who wants to make revenge on her husband. Here we are dealing with a malevolent, I can hear it.
Malevolent.
Malevolent. Yeah, action accomplished under the influence of the Chatin, Satan. One roundly condemned by society is akin to black magic, since if on the one hand this is about the protection of a unity of promotion of a value, on the other it is more than the destruction and annihilation of the man. The procedure employed are multiplied. We will relate some of the most typical ones. The woman who wants to bind her husband measures the size of his erect organ with the help of a string or wool. She ties the knot at each end and hides the cord. The man becomes impotent. Or else she can place a total new round mirror under the footsteps of her husband, who has to step over it unknowingly. Or the woman may put an open foldable knife under the feet of her husband and then close it again. Some procedures are even more colorful. Thus, somewhere close to Algiers, a woman who wants to bind her husband is advised to gather some drops of his sperm and to mix them with the whitish earth found in specific places, which is then formed into a small silhouette of human form. This statuette is then hidden in a place known only to the woman, in general in an abandoned tomb in a cemetery. Lastly, certain magical formula can be written on the horn of a goat that is then thrown into a cemetery, progressively reducing the man to impotence. This enumeration is not exhaustive. The methods are depending on the place and particular custom, but all those listed have certain common features. First, it is the essential value of speech. In bewitching, there is always an invocation, an incantation that accompanies the authenticates the act. This is why it is necessary to know the lineage of the man that one is binding, in particular his mother's maiden name. In the magic ritual, the act of binding is accompanied with verbal prescriptions, instructions, and actual final notice. It is also necessary to know the importance of the knot, and bonds in these practices of binding, which are incidentally to be found in all phenomenon of a magico-religious order. It is significant that knots and strings are used in the nuptial rites to protect the young couple, though at the same time, as we know, knots are thought to imperil the consummation of the marriage. But ambivalence of this sort is to be found in all the magical religious uses of knots and bonds. In some, what is essential in all these magical and magical medical rites is the orientation that they give to the power that resides in any kind of binding, in every act of trying. The man thus made impotent may heal if the woman renounces the bewitching by destroying the knot or the statuette substitute. But the woman is not always so merciful. Once again, the indisputable intervention of the telebs. As in the preceding case, the telebs summon magical formula, amulets, and various preparations that he has the patient swallow. But the formula and products differ depending on whether the impotence results from bewitching or from the act of denjins. More precisely, the formula of products are adapted to each particular case in the system. The real key that makes it possible to determine the nature of the impotence to be treated are complicated. Patient's name, where each letter conventionally represents a certain number of mothers' maiden name, the day of the treatment and durations of the illness, and so on. Wits, a rather complex classification that, though very detailed, remains confused in Al-Soweti's work, in which no doubt permits each talib to add his personal note to it. Here are a few formulas that we thought interesting to take from Al-Soweti. The man made impotent by magical practice is cured by ingesting diverse Indian spices, ginger, pepper, cloves. In this impotence has lasted for barely a year. If it is older, the patient must be made to eat the penis of a fox or a wild donkey, prepared with the aforementioned spices, for the period of 7 days. The impotence can also be cured by writing certain formula and sign on a axe that is heated up and then cooled again in some water placed under the patient. It is impossible to write some Quranic verses on the saucer on which the man's and woman's names are almost mentioned together with a plea of, "Oh my God, I ask you to unite this man and this woman," or else the following Quranic expressions may be written under the patient's navel. Those who have moved away from God and from the Prophet will be destroyed like their predecessors. Here is yet another way to cure impotence. The writings of a series of cannibalistic formulas. Cannibalistic formulas. No, it's not cam.
No, it's.
Hold on. What'd you say?
You had it right the first time.
Okay, thank you. On the vase filled with oil, with which the man and woman coat their genitals, and their occasions in Kabbalistic grid, with 9 squares in which are inscribed specific letters and numbers, and is drawn on an egg, and on each side of the grid, in the margins, the following qualifying adjectives are written: violent, strong, hard, powerful. The patient with impotence is made to eat the egg. The shell is enclosed in a small cloth bag that was used to cook the egg and is hung from the woman's neck. Ultimately, we see the talibs combat the bewitching with a sort of counter magic. On the one hand, he seeks to replace the penis with the genitals of an animal, serving as a product of substitution. On the other hand, he answers the magic formula of sorcery with incantatory formula, in which one often finds the word open, key open, picked, staff of Moses, etc. And the marabout of Castellano, can't say it. Do. I was just trying. Oh, it's a place. It looks like it's a place. Wait. Oh, I didn't say why. Come on. Oh, is it? An influential Italian diplomat, an author of the book of pronunciation, of course.
Domino's best deal ever just got better. And then there's this with stuffed crust.
You are looking at Julian's pronunciation guide, where we look at how to pronounce better some of the most mispronounced words in the world.
Oh, shut up.
Another curious word, but how do you say what you're looking for?
I didn't say croissant.
Italian pronunciation.
Castiglione. It's Italian.
English,
Cited the case of a man from Teret who was bound for 10 years and whom he succeeded in unbinding with such practice in 7 days. We have seen the impotence in men, and most often attributed to an act of bewitching, to a binding, but the binding can also be directed at women. Indeed, young women are often bound by their parents. At issue in this instance is the protection of their virginity. We know, in fact, that virginity in its properly anatomical sense must be preserved in absolute fashion in the young women prior to marriage. To give as an virgin a girl who is not one would be a grave insult and a swindle on the part of the parents vis-a-vis the husband. And the day of the marriage, the parent of the married woman await patiently the moment when the husband comes out of the bridal room to present to the entire family the blood-stained sheet. Peremptory evidence. Let's find out what word it is. Peremptory. You can help me. I was just trying to pronounce that, but you said I had it right.
Yeah, this one I think is preemptory.
Peremptory.
Peremptory evidence of the virginity of his young spouse. If this virginity cannot be proven in this fashion, the husband has the right to send the girl back to her parents. And the girl is then doomed to shame and celibacy, when for the woman marriage is the only human and social consecration. The principle prior to marriage, the young girl does not leave the house unless accompanied by her mother or an old relative. But sometimes, above all, in the court side, that rule cannot be observed because it is necessary to tend the goats and the sheep, gathering in the fields of cereals or fetch some water from the spring. This is why the parents take care to bind their daughter to avoid any accidents. At issue here is the protection of the family. The whole and the binding does not assume an occult character. It is done in the knowledge of the one bound, who plays a role in the ritual. Here again, the techniques are multiple and vary depending upon local and familial traditions. One of those that seem to us especially frequently carried out was related to us by the female Muslim nurse in our unit who had been bound by her parents before her marriage. The young girl is placed on a brand new trunk with a key lock. The mother then closes the trunk in pronouncing an established formula. The young girl is bound. At the moment of marriage, these gestures are repeated in the inverse order. The young girl is placed on the trunk. The mother opens it, and the bind is lifted. In these ritual ties, knots and padlocks are often used, symbolic value of which is clear cut. But in all cases, the result is the same. The girl is protected against all breaches of her virginity, accepted or not. The mechanism of this protection is not always clearly clarified. It seems that it works in a general fashion by making a potential deflowering impotent. And this protection is so absolute that it sometimes results in unforeseen consequences. We are told of the case of a woman who was bound in her youth and whose mother died before she was able to unbind her. This woman, although married several times, was each time sent back by the husband because she could not succeed in having intercourse with her. Let us also relate the anecdote, the antecedent. Incident? Let me make sure.
Anecdote.
Yeah, I said an anecdote where a young woman's uncle complained to the mother about having seen her daughter seek out the presence of boys a little too much for her good reputation. It was retorted, and there was nothing to fear since she had been bound. B. Young girls are not the only ones who get bound. Thus, the parents of a repudiated woman can bind her so as to be sure that she will respect her transitory celibacy. And one says sometimes that parents await a few days until after the marriage before they unbind their daughter to show pointedly to the husband that she has remained responsible since her divorce. C. Sometimes the husband is brought to bind his own wife, especially when he has reason to doubt her fidelity. Binding can then occur in two ways. In general, by making impotent any man other than the husband who wants to have relations with the woman. We again see here the notion of selective binding that we observe in binding impotence. But it also happens that the bewitching determines in the spouse a vanishing of every desire and even the taste for living, resulting in a veritable effective death, which is indeed effective in eliminating all risk of congenital infidelity. D. Lastly, a woman can be, a woman can be bound by another woman, by a stranger. This is usually the case of a woman who, for example, has been cheating on or left for another, or who binds this ladder to prevent her from remaining with her husband. But while in the preceding cases, the bind of the young girl or a woman was a normal and illicit practice, one accepted by the collective morality. Here it assumes a character of vengeance and malevolence, which society condemns as such. We thus encounter the same distinctions between black and white magic that was seen in the binding of men. And that's the end of that one. 20 more minutes. The current aspects of mental care in Algeria. Jean Dequecler, Franz Fanon, Raymond Location, M. Masui, can't say the rest, Linda Joville Psychiatric Hospital, January 1955. La Information Psychiatric, an initiative to devote an issue to the institution of French overseas departments seems particularly typical at a time when Algiers is enduring a shortage of several thousands of beds for mental patients who require urgent treatment, as well as for Muslim patients hospitalized in France who have requested reparations. While the Orleansville's earthquake has just deprived it of 200 vital beds. The problem of psychiatric care in the colonies was raised in its entirety by Rabuel and Regis. Report to the 22nd Congress I can't say it because it's all in French, in 1912. The member of the Congress passed a resolution stipulating the conditions of fulfillment of suitable care. Not until 1932 in Algiers did the active concern begin to be taken in the performing of psychiatric assistance, of the instigation of the Médecin General and General Inspector of Colonial Health Services in Ministry des Colonies. Lassent, a professor, a Perrot, a decree of 14th March 1933 governs the recruitment of doctors for psychiatric units in Algeria. Doctors from Metropolitan Civil Service. Two directives from 10 August 1934 governed the operation of psychiatric units in Algeria. The frontline units of Algeria, Oran and Constantine, the psychiatric hospital of Belinda. As for the frontline units, the formula adopted was for open observation units, whereas the psychiatric hospital of Belinda was to operate under the conditions prescribed by the law of 30th of June 1838. The construction phase was then begun, and in July 1935, the attended measures were in place, with the opening of Constantine open units. In 1938, in his report to the Congress, all in French, in Algeria, Albin drew up an assessment of the resources in Algeria, according to which, for the first time, units, Algeria's 43 beds, Oran's 55 beds, and Constantine's 62 beds. At that time, the hospital in Belinda had a population of 1,000 patients, already in excess of plane capacity. From that time on, Professor Prat a technical advisor in psychiatry to the general government of Algeria, insistently asked for the increase in beds numbers. He estimated the need to be 5,000 beds and recommended building psychiatric hospitals in the departments of Oran and Constantine. Unfortunately, his advice was not heeded, and the solution implemented the creation of psychiatric outbuildings in Amil in Orleansville was unsatisfactory for the psychiatric viewpoint, and did not supply the number of beds required. Since 1938, building work has been negligible, and the situation in 1954 is as follows. Algeria is a country of 10 million inhabitants, comprised of 8.5 million Muslims and 1.5 million Europeans. Psychiatry in Algeria is found on the following principles. In each department, there is a frontline service and a second-line service. The departments of Algiers, the frontline service is located in Mustafa Hospital, the facility hospital in which there are 81 beds. The psychiatric hospital Blinda Joville, within 2,200 beds, and the annexie of Amil in Orleansville, with 300 and 200 beds, respectively, present the second line. The Department of Oran, whose first line is located at the Hospital of Oran, has 545 beds in all. From the Department of Constantine, its first line facility is the Hospital of Constantine, of 76 beds. Secure units, 16 in total, represents the second line of Bogies, Philippineville, Gumala, and Borgi Bau Arduridi. These psychiatric clinics are insured by one psychiatric doctor for the Department of Oran, by one psychiatric doctor for the Department of Constantine, by 5 psychiatric doctors of Belinda Hospital, and by 1 psychiatric doctor in Mustafa Hospital. The faculty clinic is overseen by Professor Mankoux and his assistants. Otherwise put, for 10 million inhabitants, there are 80 psychiatrists and 2,500 beds. Moreover, in 1952, 536 mentally ill Muslims were treated in metropolitan hospitals. One thus sees that there is almost 1 bed per 4,000 inhabitants. But if you consider this consideration must be taken into account, that the hospital in Blinda Joville has been planned for 1,200 patients. In the gradual overcoming of the service slowly eliminating its effectiveness, then we reach barely 1 bed for 7,000 inhabitants. We can easily imagine the number of problems that such a situation arises from a psychiatrist who wants to work. In this study, we set out to show how on the 3 planes of admissions, stays, and discharges, psychiatric practices today prove very difficult. Admissions. At M. What's M? Okay. Though in the metropole, patients who come to the hospital endowed with a placement certificate and an application for admissions must be accepted as a matter of obligation. It is not the same in Algeria, where admissions take place only within the limits of existing vacancies, that is, discharges and deaths. As of 23rd September 1954, 150 files were pending at the admissions office in Blinda. They are divided as follows: European women, 33; indigenous women, 141; European men, 87; indigenous men, 583. These files came from the 3 Algerian departments, and their numbers grows regularly. Many were opened several months ago, sometimes more than an entire year. It can therefore arise that a patient has already been cured by the time it is his or her turn to be admitted to the hospital. These extended delays bring about various incidents. A. Aggressive reactions from individual place late. B. Aggressive reaction from family towards the patient, whose reaction cannot be gauged. C. Gravitation of the conditions owing to the lateness of treatment. D. Minor scandals. It happens that patients drive as a matter of urgency to the hospital or refuse to stay for a long time outside the gates before they can go back to their families. Patients who react by committing misdemeanors have their cases dismissed and are nevertheless kept in prison while waiting for their place. The Perfect recently issued a formal demand to receive these cases of medical jurisprudence as a priority within the maximum period of 1 month. It goes without saying that such a measure can only be applied to the detriment of individuals presenting disorders that are perhaps more acute and more characteristics. The mode of placement for the hospital as a whole is roughly informed. It is almost always a matter of a PO, since for the 2,101 patients present on 22 September, only 36 PVs can be noted, 15 of which are paying clients. The request for free voluntary placements is the fact submitted to a complex administrative inquiry into the mental patient's financial and familial situation, which is at best completed in 2 or 3 months. It is nevertheless notable that the number of PVGs is tending to increase, with a PO having first been issued, but omissions being impossible. A request for a PVG can be made as often successful, completed prior to interment. Lastly, a difficult of an essentially administrative order often arises for a certain number of patients without precise identity, mostly from Morocco or the territories of the South. These X's and SNPs without patronymic names are later recognized through the reference numbers and the photographs. Let me look at something real quick. $3.99. All right, we'll do.
You should stop.
We'll do one more. As the ward cannot be extended, even the smallest space were soon used up, and the massive overcrowding of units became much that the planned regulations capacity nearly doubled everywhere. The tuberculosis ward, designed for 32 patients, hosts 74. A ward of agitated patients, planned for 44, contained 106. A ward planned to host 80 difficult patients contains 165, etc. Moreover, the hospital, which at the time of building was planned for on 971 patients,
Thank you.
nearly all the
My name is Myra Begay. I'm the Tuba City chapter president.
Yes, you do.
And I want to welcome you to Tuba City and thank you.
Of the refectories no longer prove adequate. What hope can there be to perform therapeutic activities in the ward of 170 beds? For 14 years, the doctors have been asking the administration to build workshops, day rooms, and chapel built 20 years ago. It is not only used for worship. A priest comes once a month. It has also been transformed into an ergotherapy workshop, into a classroom for the orderlies, into the film theater, etc. Similarly, the mosque is also used as a basket of wrecker work workshops. In addition, the Muffet comes to lead prayers here twice a month. In the ward, many patients, those who do not attend ergotherapy, have no other choice. They are thrown out into the courtyard after breakfast. There is no day room. Patients have few options for sitting down unless on the ground, and the sun in Algeria is very harsh in the summertime. Staff members in the housekeeping service have had to be considerably increased. In the kitchen, there are 30 employees. For the electricity, 8. For electricity, 88. In linen rooms, 26 painting, 19 masonry, 19 laundry, 20. These clearly enables the hospital to ensure its own maintenance without external help. In the office, we see the same high numbers, 26 employees between the housekeeping and the administrative service. There are more than 208 employees. By contrast, no parallel growth has occurred in the facility of the general services. The overloading electrical installations regularly break down, in especially regrettable situations as electricity is used to heat and the ward. Inefficient water convenience only permits distribution of 3 hours a day in summer, despite the serious difficulties that result from this situation in the units, especially the senile units. However, the medical equipment is quite satisfactory. All the requests are quite rapidly fulfilled, and the audit committee has particularly never questioned any expenditures of medical interest. The medical personnel are relatively large in number, almost in line with the official norms. 1 per 15 in the calm wards, 1 per 10 in the admissions wards, or in the ward of agitated individuals. A number of medical agents total of 820. Lastly, this year saw the creation of a nursing school. 128 agents are now taking these courses, and the qualifying exams will take place in December. As recruitment is carried out in the conditions that are sometimes rather exceptional, it unfortunately transpires too often that the agents are illiterate or only know how to write their names. Fortunately, there is no lack of goodwill. As one says, each time that we have asked the staff for an extra effort, our calls have been answered with perfect spontaneity. Little by little, even those who are most lacking from the intellectual viewpoint front up to supply their precious help in a clinic in which there is a lot to do. Hold on a second. Okay, we're good. Okay. All the time it has been necessary to try to regulate the recruitment. Currently, school completion certificates are required, or else an equivalent exam has to have been passed. These measures are adopted very quickly as a medical administrative team is becoming increasingly aware of the importance of collective problems on the local level. The patient's living conditions are gradually improving. Only thanks to the collaboration has it been possible to carry out certain things. Thus, a week journal was set up for which the administration provided a printing shop. Having no room for events, we were obliged to have our recreational events in the ward, and electrician and joiners are made available to the patients to arrange the stage, lighting, microphones, etc. Similarly, on the occasions of the major feasts that rhythm the Muslims' religion, traditional dishes are served to the patients. More than the material contributions, the administrative and economic services have taken a great interest in the social and collective events the patients have arranged, and the directors and doctors came together to inaugurate the Moorish Cafe. Clearly, it will be difficult to continue to, if no decisions is made to build the function room that has been sought after for 14 years by the institution's successive doctors. Weekly film screenings take place in the chapel, the character of acoustics of which are hardly suitable for several events. Lastly, it has recently been possible to organize weekly outings by coach to the seaside, and we'll stop there. We'll stop at where it says discharges on page 401.
Okay. I'm glad that we reached this point. I would like to say that if you hear a door slam or something, pay no attention to it. I'll tell you about it after we get off live.
All right. So we're just going over like what their I can't even think of the word. Their development, and they're going over the bad things and the good things. They're going over how to engage with Jewish people better, because that's the failing that they had. They were getting very good engagement from the European section, but because they had no history or no knowledge of of the Muslims, of Muslim people, it made it better as soon as they figured it out. So they're just trying to improve things and stuff like that, and they're showing you what they have and what needs to be improved. That's what we're going over. It's like,
and I liked going over what they believed and stuff like that. It really helps you understand people.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and close it out. 401 is where we'll start off tomorrow. All right. All right, everybody. I hope everybody.